Contrary to popular belief, male concubines were welcomed and praised as a symbol of riches, power, and masculinity in the Ottoman Empire. This practice of keeping young boys and men as sexual partners in court has a long history in many ancient cultures, which is why it's no surprise that there are also a handful of stories about these concubines during the Ottoman Empire. However, while there is less discrimination when it comes to this practice, it doesn't mean that male concubines during this empire lived happily ever after. The truth is that there is still a stigma that needs to be abolished. Just take, for example, the infamous story of Tayyib and Tahir, two young Ottomans who were captured by Christians. But instead of inflicting pain and submitting them to torture, their captors showered them with good things and kept them happy. Sadly, this didn't last long, and in the end, they had to prove their love to other people. In this video, we will go over other intriguing and interesting tales of male concubines who lived through and survived the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire. Young boys and men who were especially handsome or talented were frequently taken into the court and groomed to become concubines, where they would serve the Sultan and his courtiers in various capacities. And since the Ottomans were known for their love of beauty and appreciation for the arts, having male concubines was common. Moving on, the Ottoman Empire ruled over a sizable portion of Southeast Europe, Western Asia, and Northern Asia between the 14th and early 20th centuries. The empire's culture, politics, and economy reached their zenith under Sultan Suleiman I, his son Selim II, and his grandson Murad III, who all governed from Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. Suleiman I's significant legal reforms contributed to the development of Ottoman law for many generations, and ultimately made it feasible for such advancement in the empire. The title the Magnificent was also given to Suleiman in the West because of his reputation as a powerful and wealthy monarch who was able to reach great heights in politics and culture. Surprisingly, the Ottomans did not categorize sexualities, despite the nature of their empire. They would only differentiate between lovers who are passive and partners who are active. As a result, you can say that people would choose their partners not because of their sexual preferences, but rather because everyone is essentially permitted to be with anyone. But of course there's a catch. In fact, there was still discrimination, which explains why marriages between the same gender are not recognized as valid. It wasn't immediately apparent, but as the days and years went by, it gradually crept into everyone's daily lives, and that's when the issue for men who love other men started to arise. Male concubines during the Ottoman Empire. It was well known that the Ottoman Empire tolerated anything having to do with homosexuality. Although it wasn't as accepting to the extent that such a relationship was legal, the empire was okay with it, and at most, that was enough. People didn't really make a big deal out of homosexual relationships since they thought they were common, which also meant people could have male concubines, and no one would comment about it. Well, at least for the most part. The Ottoman elites found this to be particularly true. But as progress was introduced to the empire, things started to gradually change. The 18th century was a time of excitement and joy for the Ottoman Empire, but homosexuality was a practice that was kept hidden from society. However, the elite continued to engage in these kinds of relationships on a regular basis because they still wanted to have fun. They even created a mechanism that ensures confidentiality, which is typically used by an elderly guy who frequently engages in same-sex relationships with young boys. Thus, the Ottoman elites created a framework that led them to raise armies and foster homosexuality, because these practices were so pervasive in their society. The advantages of being a part of this system attracted a lot of yamaks, or volunteers. They were eager to be excused from paying taxes in exchange for accompanying elites and older males in the process. Yenicheri, or soldiers, also adored this arrangement since it allowed them to socialize with these yamaks while receiving instruction and education. So, you can say it was a win-win situation, or is it? The Sultan was in charge of such a system, and the yamaks are reported to have lived in gender-specific houses. At the same time, the Sultan was also responsible for overseeing the children's everyday lives and educational situations. Until the Signor deems them suitable for office, they never leave the palace. A Venetian envoy named Benedetto Ramberti provided a detailed description of the organization within these homes, stating that there are about 500 youths, ranging in age from 8 to 20, who reside in the palace and are the delight of Signor, and they never leave the aforesaid palace until they have reached the age when the Signor thinks them fit for office. But eventually, everything nice comes to an end. Even though I said there was little to no discrimination during the Ottoman Empire, things eventually shifted for the worse. The Penal Code revisions of 1858 were the catalyst for everything. According to the law, the person who dares to commit the abominable act publicly contrary to modesty and sense of shame is to be imprisoned for from 3 months to 1 year, and a fine of from 1 Mecidiye gold piece to 10 Mecidiye gold pieces is to be levied. Records also showed that in Istanbul, violence against homosexuals began to be encouraged by the government in the latter half of the 20th century. Most of them involved beatings, hair chopping, and, in the worst cases, rape. This raised more questions than there had been time to address. Many people were surprised by the abrupt turn in events and the reason why there had never been such a strong anti-homosexual sentiment previously. The Quran's interpretation of homosexuality provides the simplest justification for the sudden hostility. The Quran alone could not, however, be held responsible for the change. This is the rationale behind the introduction of Western influences and their concepts of modernity. Given this, it is highly likely that such teaching has had a significant impact on how people see homosexual relationships. Even worse, it prompted a change of perspective about it. In the end, the Western conception of sexuality, according to historians, fully tipped the scales. Keep in mind that there was no such thing as a definite gender identity during the pre-modern era. In the Ottoman Empire, people choose their partners based on appearance, emotions, and desire. However, when foreign influences began to permeate the empire, everything changed, and I think we can all agree that it was not for the better. Tayyib and Tahir. If you can recall, I briefly mentioned Tayyib and Tahir at the opening of this video, but brief is insufficient to convey their complete narrative. To start, they were traveling to Egypt to become dervishes. However, they were caught by Christian noblemen along the way, and while most expected that such captors would inflict pain and suffering on the 2 Ottoman males they found, they actually did the exact opposite. The captive and the captors eventually fell in love, and I know this sounds straight out of a fairy tale, but maybe their story is actually a fairy tale in the making. But unlike other love stories, theirs didn't end happily. When the authorities learned about it, they classified it as barbarous by Christian standards because it was considered out of the ordinary. While their love was nothing but precious, Christian teaching regarded it as nothing more than sodomy and deliberately put anyone who would indulge in it in jail. Tahir and Tayyib experienced the same outcome, and they were imprisoned along with their 2 captors, but the 2 Ottomans received a pardon, leaving their 2 Christian lovers still behind bars. But this didn't stop them from being with each other, and so their 2 Christian lovers found a way to escape, and they were able to find each other again. But wait, there's more. To fulfill their desire and be with the love of their lives without being constrained by their religion, they even went as far as to convert to Islam. By the late 19th century, homosexual encounters had started to decline, and young women had taken on a more desirable role. At this point, the prevalence of homosexuality in the Ottoman Empire began to drop sharply. In Istanbul, girls are becoming the recipients of the affection that was previously typically reserved for young men. Ahmet Cevdet Pasha explained the cause of the shift in terms of the state of nature, saying, "Woman lovers have increased in number, while boy beloveds have decreased. It is as if the people of Lot have been swallowed by the earth." Sadly, there isn't much documentation of what followed, but it's safe to conclude that there was a moment in the Ottoman Empire when nothing stood between gender and love, and the story of Tayyib and Tahir is only an example that when it comes to love, anything is possible. How about you? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more.